We're about to come to an end of this Congress, but we still have very interesting and important speakers to go. One of them is Amin Rafiee. He's a proponent of peer-to-peer and Bitcoin advocate. He has a very rich background, and he's especially focused on decentralization. It's a term that we have heard many, many times, and that deserves many different perspectives. I guess Amin will gonna talk about something which he encountered during his career, and I had to write it out because it's a very long list of things that he can do. Basically, his background includes industrial design, engineering, research and development, marketing, international business, philosophy, and psychology. So I expect decentralization, peer-to-peer in a very rich context. I mean, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I guess to just open up, I just want to say thank you and how grateful I am to be here amongst elites in the Bitcoin scene and other coding and programmers and things like that. And I guess overall, it's been a great experience for me to be here and hear a different perspective. You know, normally I attend Bitcoin conferences, which is just usually the startup platforms and CEOs and things like that. So to be able to get in touch with people behind the scene and people that are, you know, anarchists and looking for ways to overcome our existing boundaries and limitations, it's a really great honor to be here and like meet all of you. I guess to just give you a background, my name is Amin Rafiee, as explained. I've been working in the Bitcoin scene since November 2013, finding different ways where I can contribute and, you know, on top of that, help the teams and help them overcome any boundaries that they may face. And at the same time, I've learned a lot myself as well. I mean, it's one of the first times in my life I feel at home and I feel like the ideas correspond with my personal understanding of the world. And, you know, it's very different from the corporate world where it's all bureaucracy and very little attention paid to what is actually important. So I just want to overall present to you the ideas that I have come across and how they have kind of resonated with my own personal beliefs and how things should be and things that I feel are important to demonstrate to audiences for them to get a better understanding of what decentralization is in the Bitcoin world and how it's developing through different platforms. I guess before I open up on that topic, I just really want to show you this video, which I personally think puts things into perspective when people speak about Bitcoin and where it's all going. It's just like a 2-minute video.
Millions of Americans own a personal computer. If you're one of them, you can now glimpse the future with nothing more than a modem, a phone line, and a few dollars a month.
Oh, that's
and
right.
the mark with the A and then the ring around it.
At.
See, that's what I said. Katie said she thought it was about.
Yeah. Oh.
But I've never heard it. I've never heard it said. I've always seen the mark, but never heard it said. And then it sounded stupid when I said it. Violence at NBC.
Just what is this main artery of the information superhighway?
Every business, no matter how large, no matter how small, will be on the internet in the year 2000. It's the primary way that people will look up information. It will replace the yellow pages as we know it today.
Are a lot of people just getting onto the internet because they feel that they have to get onto the playing field, so to speak?
But it's very hip to be on the internet right now.
There it is. Violence at NBC, GE.com. I mean...
Well, Allison should know.
What is internet anyway?
Internet is the massive computer network, the one that's becoming really big now.
What do you mean? That's big? How does what do you write to it like mail?
No, a lot of people use it and communicate with, I guess they can communicate with NBC writers and producers. Allison, can you explain what internet is?
No, she can't say anything in 10 seconds or less.
I'm afraid that if I subscribed to something like internet,
You would really be hooked.
I would get hooked and I would never, you know, spend time with my family.
And I feel like, does it bother you at all that these are all people that you don't really know? I mean, that everybody's, you know, signing on and having these conversations and whining together or griping together or whatever, with people that, I mean, I don't know. If I
use group therapy of the 90s.
Well, as I mentioned, I have no desire to be a part of the internet because I feel like I'm so inundated with information all the time that I don't want more. Don't you ever feel like it's just constant bombardment.
I don't know, I guess the thing I resent most is I would resent that, you know, at least when you're home, if the phone rings, you have the option of not answering it. On the internet, people can send you messages all the time, you don't even really hear from them.
Alright. Well, that's pretty funny. 20 years later, every person on the planet knows what the internet is, and they have no choice but to be a part of it. So, no. Okay, so to give you a basic idea of what Bitcoin and the blockchain technology allow people to do is take an idea that's anarchist in its nature and introduce the incentive on top of that. So existing models were already on the market where you could have decentralized storage and things like that, but there was no real incentive for people to participate in these networks and to be able to share their hard drive. You know, a lot of people did it out of the concept to push the idea forward. But what Bitcoin allowed these people to do is take that idea and introduce the incentive layer, which allows them to now be rewarded for doing things like this. And other people who would ordinarily stay away from such ideas are introduced to the market and introduced to the platform because now they have a reason to be there. So the money aspect is, I guess, what brings a lot of people into it. It's not directly, I guess, fiat money. I mean, you could be rewarded in terms of, you know, I'll show you in a bit. I just want to show you one more video just before we go forward to give you, I guess, a contrasting difference between how people in power kind of perceived and expressed their ideas about Bitcoin and how they came to change over time. I mean, this video is just over a year old, and you know, being in the Bitcoin scene myself from 2013, it really showed me the tremendous amount of power the media has, and if they don't want an idea to succeed, how much authority and power they have to kind of change the people's minds and their perceptions into what they believe to be true. And you know, I already knew about this in a theoretical perspective, but once you're in it and you see this for yourself, I mean, in the Bitcoin scene, you're seeing developments, you're seeing how it's affecting people's lives, and then you go and hear from your friends, oh, Bitcoin is crashing, oh, Bitcoin is that thing that's going to fail, isn't it? It's a bubble, it's a this, it's that, and all the lies that were produced through the media. It really put things into perspective for me, how an idea that threatens existing authorities and centralization as it is, you know, can be washed down in such a heavy way. So this is kind of Warren Buffett speaking about Bitcoin about a year and a half ago, or just over a year ago, and I find it really interesting in comparison to the ideas now.
I was at a conference, the Allen Company conference in Arizona, the tech conference, and Bitcoin was the big two-syllable word that everybody was talking about and trying to understand. I'm just curious of your thoughts on that.
Stay away from it.
Stay away from Bitcoin.
Well, it's a mirage, basically. I mean, it's a method of transmitting money. That's a very effective way of transmitting money, doing it anonymously and all that. A check is a way of transmitting money, too. Our checks are worth a whole lot of money just because they can transmit money. Our money orders, you can transmit money by money orders. People do it. I hope Bitcoin becomes a better way of doing it, but you could replicate it a bunch of different ways, and it will be. And the idea that it has some huge intrinsic value is just a joke in my view.
That's interesting to compare it to this thing. Have you thought of that? It's like, yeah, I mean...
That's what it's doing, it's transmitting.
There's something that the checks are actually drawn, you're drawing upon something. It's not that...
You're transmitting money. Yeah, it hovers on both ends. I mean, from the guy that puts it in, right. Yeah.
What? Isn't it a ledger? It's a ledger, right? It's an electronic ledger.
Yeah. It's a very fast money order. Anonymous.
So.
How was it?
Okay, so you can kind of see how wrong they were about the whole concept, and you can kind of see how they had no idea what they're talking about. So it took them about 2 or 3 years to catch up to the idea and to see how they can use it, and that's such the mentality of the people that want to use it and use it for themselves, I guess. So they kind of put the fear tactic forward first, so people are discouraged to get involved with it, and then once they learn the technology, they adapt it and use it for their own purpose. So incentives introduced a layer that allows these ideas to come to life, and that's, I guess, where I want to start this topic from. So first on the list is storage. Storage came about I guess, a year and a bit ago, and since then they have been developing a decentralized storage platform. So if you compare it to existing platforms such as Dropbox, iCloud, and Google Drive, you can see how many times they've all been hacked and how many files have been distributed throughout the internet, and people's privacy and their own personal possessions have been exposed. So by decentralizing this entire platform, you allow people to have a greater security that is unmatched by centralization. Because once you have centralization, you have one point of trust, which allows people to, you kind of have to trust them, and you have no other choice. But in a decentralized manner, no one is at trust, so the entire network looks after itself. They recently achieved their third milestone, which was reaching 1 petabyte of data, and they're currently hovering about 1.3, so 10% of what Dropbox was in 2012. And for a decentralized platform, this is a remarkable achievement that was made possible by introducing the incentive layer. And the other things is that now that they have the storage capacity, they can build on top of it. So they can introduce file sharing platforms, they can introduce decentralized video sharing, they can introduce notary. So if you want to verify documents and things, it can be distributed throughout the network and so forth. And I guess the brilliance of this platform is that, a lot of platforms have come through and they have some sort of a centralization at some stage, so backing the files up or something like this. But this avoids that concept by allowing you to use your hard drive. So everyone has a hard drive that's not used to the maximum capacity. And it allows you to tap into that and be rewarded by sharing that resource. Something that's already there and it's just collecting dust. No one is using it. And very rarely do people use 100% of their hard drive capacity. And hard drives nowadays are very, very cheap. So, it's a brilliant idea to take that concept and introduce incentives on top of it, which you can then go back and pay for cloud sharing yourself or be rewarded and converted to Bitcoins if you wish. So it creates the entire economy of something that was otherwise being left alone. So moving forward, I guess the other aspect is decentralized forecasting. So if you take an idea that is gambling, for example, and you apply it to forecasting, you have a completely new market. And the thing with forecasting is currently we rely on economists and people as such to give us an idea on how things are going to be. But the problem with this is rarely do they put their money where their mouth is, and rarely are economists rich from it. So we listen to their advice, we listen to their forecasting, but a lot of times they're just guessing. No one really comes out and says, I don't know, but they make their money from guessing. Or what if we take their reputation and put it online? And what if we take their words and put it against their outcome and get a better idea of who is telling them the truth and who is actually forecasting for reality? So the idea comes out of wisdom of the crowd. So there have been numerous experiments or ideas in the past that have demonstrated when you ask a large group of people to give their estimation on an answer or a question query, the result is, in most cases, when averaged out, more accurate than when asking one or two professionals or experts in that field. So this has been numerously demonstrated throughout history, and I guess taking this idea and applying it to being able to forecast the future is a brilliant idea in itself. So Augur has been doing this, and they just finished their crowd sale ending at, I think, $5.2 million raised for the idea, because it's such a revolutionary concept. It hasn't been done before, to be able to decentralize a method of Googling into the future, so to say. And within the release, in the first 10 hours, they had over 10,000 users subscribed to the 10,000 unique subscribers to the channel, so they can test the alpha release. And how it works is if you got reputation holders, so people that hold the reputation tokens are able to give an answer on what the outcome is going to be, and they're kind of the oracles of the system. So within the first 4 weeks, they're given an answer, which is private, and then the next 4 weeks, they give another answer, which is made public. So you don't really need the reputation tokens to wage on the outcome. The people that wage on the outcome is done separately. Reputation tokens purely for the oracles to maintain the system and maintain the integrity of the system. We'll skip that one. So another interesting concept for me is at first you see banks such as Commonwealth Bank of Australia, which is where I'm from, and you see how they close down bank accounts that have any association to do with Bitcoin. They fear the idea so much that they even are willing to lose their own customers over it. And then you see a year later, or about a year and a half later, their own people adopting the technology. And now that they are ready, they can join forces, and obviously it threatens the existing institutions so much that they must join forces to overcome the threat that is facing them. I guess the threat comes from, as said by the R3 CEO, he's the person that kind of collectively went out to all the banks and put them into a group to be able to use the blockchain technology. And his fear that the blockchain technology will do to finance what the internet did to media comes from this kind of analogy. So if you look at it in the past, we had to rely on press, which was newspaper, television, radio, magazines, and in a lot of cases these were centralized. So you didn't really have a say on what news comes out. But with the introduction of the internet and social media, now every person in this room can be a news presenter, and every person can produce their own version of what really happened in an event. And this has made a much more reliable source where the content has become more valuable than the source. So it has extraordinarily pushed the field of news and what people are saying around the world to a whole nother level. So the concept behind the Bitcoin and blockchain technology has been pushed forward by anarchists, and at the same time, a lot of people out of that zone, the state leaders and the state authorities, are taking this idea and trying to see how they can adapt it for themselves so they can use it for themselves. But the problem with that is once it has been diluted and pushed down, it will become like everything else. It will lose the very thing that it was meant to do, the very essence of it that made it so beautiful. And you can see this through regulations and a lot of other tools that they're pushing forward to dilute it down to kind of get rid of its true power. But the problem is their existing laws and rules don't apply to Bitcoin. Bitcoin is so far beyond anything that ever imagined, any laws that exist in the European Union and any other places, that they are still confused as to what it is and how to define it. And I've been to many, many conferences around Europe that lawyers come and they say pretty much there is no law that can sustain Bitcoin and what it is. And they have gone through, is it an asset, is it a commodity, is it a currency? And none of the laws currently existing apply to Bitcoin being any of those things. This is from Barclay, Chief Design and Digital Officer, and I think it puts things into a great perspective, that they have come to the realization that there is a peer-to-peer and decentralization movement going, and this will not be stopped. I mean, if you take a look at Airbnb and what it has done to the hotel industry, if you take a look at Uber and what it's done to the taxi industry, if you take a look at BlaBlaCar and what it's done to the transport industry, I mean, these are movements that cannot be stopped. I mean, at the end of the day, these platforms all have a centralized aspect to it, and that is their weakness. But once you introduce a decentralization overview to these components, you get a very different outlook, one that cannot be stopped. So they're in the right state to fear this. So if you apply the decentralization to governance, what do? You get a 10-minute land registration rather than a bureaucracy and a lot of payments that are unnecessary in today's age. Everything is online. Things should not cost the amount that they do. You've got birth certificates, you've got marriage certificates, all done through the blockchain. And why shouldn't it be something that should be done quickly? I mean, why the bureaucracy? Why the amount of money that is spent on these ideas in today's day and age where everything is online, it can be done in a matter of seconds? And the other part is BitNation has really attempted to take the blockchain technology and apply it to something that is very, I would say, crowded and messy at the moment, which is bureaucracy of the government. So you don't necessarily need to overcome the government or put them out, but the idea is to introduce competition. I think Philip yesterday was giving a talk how the lands on the sea, so making homes and countries on sea. And the idea comes from that as well. It's about introducing competition. In governments right now, it's unnatural for 1 million or more people to follow the same rules within the same country. It doesn't make sense. People have different needs, people are from different backgrounds, they have different requirements. So by introducing competition in this way, you allow people to acquire what's necessary for them, and they will be heard better, they will be maintained better, there will be less violence, there will be less feeling of neglect. So moving forward, Suzanne has been behind this platform for quite some time now, and she's very dedicated to the idea. She's worked throughout various countries in the Middle East, Afghanistan, Libya, and she has seen what corrupted governments can do to countries. And her idea is that there are billions of people that are unbanked, and the unbanked, I'm not sure if you saw the presentation on the first night, represent a large percentage of the people on the planet. So if you introduce an economy to people that have been unheard before, so the same way storage is allowing you to be rewarded for hard drive space that was unused before. So, you know, my personal computer uses about 20% of its capacity. 80% is left unused. What about if we do this with the people that are unbanked and don't have a government? So you get the same result. You suddenly introduce a system that can supply to people that are left alone and have no way of communicating with each other or being able to sustain themselves. So this is another quote that has been kind of spoken about numerous times in various presentations throughout this event. So I'll bypass that and show you where it became a reality. So they are starting to understand that, you know, this is from one of the major banks in France. They have understood that the blockchain technology can make its existing facilities become redundant, so make them obsolete. Because when you have your control over your own money and you have facilities that do transactions in a very secure way, you know, Visa and MasterCard mainly make their money through the fraud and, you know, through the fees that they get, and most of it is caused by fraud. So once you remove that, they lose a lot of fees. They lose a lot of money that sustains their business model. So if you bring the Bitcoin technology into that world, you suddenly have players that cannot sustain themselves any longer, and they will lose their entire structure and what they have made up to that point. So, you know, you've got Western Union, for example. That business model will become obsolete with the introduction of Bitcoin, because not only is it done quicker, it's done cheaper, and you can do it anywhere in the world in a matter of 45 minutes to an hour. I mean, they cannot compete with that business model. Moving forward, this is a website that I and other few people from BitNation's ambassadors and members put together for the refugees. So the concept was to introduce a way for them to be able to get an identity. So if they have family members, they can connect with their family members. So if they have places to visit or places not to visit, can be marked on the maps. And also to provide them with a Bitcoin-based Visa debit card, which will allow them to spend money without waiting for governing authorities to allow them to have a bank account or such, so they can access these things. And we believe this is a very useful way of using the blockchain technology and what Bitcoin and everything else has been bringing to the scene and applying it to real-time crisis around the world. I mean, you know, this is something that's happening right now. There's over 1 million refugees coming into Europe, as you know, they have already come, and there will be more to come. And the idea is to take Bitcoin and give it to the people that were really, for which it was really designed to do, I mean, to be for. You know, the Bitcoin, the idea was to help the people that have no banking facilities, that don't have access to governing authorities to come and help them. So this is a great way, I believe, to help them. And on top of that, once we link the identification system to the Bitcoin debit cards, we'll be able to send the donations directly to their accounts, and they will be able to spend it wherever they are. So that's something we're working on with our ambassadors, and we hope to send out 100 and then by then 1,000, and then we'll work it out from there, from different locations throughout Europe. So by international law, you're allowed to have rules that you believe are for yourself. So international law isn't, I guess, enforced as such, because every state at the end of the day is able to dictate for themselves what they want to do. But by using this concept, we're able to say, you know,